everyone, it's Kate from Sleep Time Consulting, and I want to talk to you today about sleep science. And the reason why I'm here to talk about that is because I'm going to take you on a journey to understand everything you need to know about your child's sleep so that you can recognise the potential issues and start making changes to help get your little one's sleep back on track. This doesn't have to be about harsh kind of crying out techniques. It doesn't have to be about full-on sleep training or strict routines. It has to be about understanding the basics. And that's why today I wanted to talk to you about sleep science so that you can start that journey to understanding. So the first thing I want to talk about is, well, taking you back to kind of my school days a little while ago, and about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you remember that triangle, I don't know, we did a bit of psychology, and sleep was at the bottom of it because it was really, really important. It was on a par with having a roof over your head and eating as well. And so I think it's really important that we recognise that as parents in terms of how we value our little one's sleep. I think over the last few years, since I started doing this 5.5 years ago, sleep is talked about a lot more and is valued a lot more, but we can do more to recognise that on a par with safe environment to sleep in and to live in and feeding, etc., sleep should be valued as importantly. So we need to understand that to kind of help our little ones to sleep better, essentially. But when it comes to sleep science and sleep research, it's a little bit tricky to get lots of information from it because we can't really talk when we're asleep, obviously, can we? And it's very hard for adults to talk about it, but it's even harder to understand it from a child's point of view. So there is limited research out there, but what we do know is quite useful. And so I won't go into the super detail about it, but I'll tell you 3 things that I think are important to understand from a sleep science point of view. The first thing is about sleep cycles. So a sleep cycle, if you haven't heard of it, is the journey that children, adults, we all go on as we go to sleep. So we start off awake, we go into sleep, and we go round a little journey of, it can vary. A newborn sleep is around about 35 minutes. A baby toddler sleep is around about 45 minutes. That happens at 4 months when sleep progression happens. And it lengthens out to 90 minutes when we get to later ages, really. So an adult has a sleep cycle around about 90 minutes. And in those kind of sleep cycles, there are different component parts, and they form different roles in the kind of the way that we rest and the way that we kind of process what's happening in the day, the way that we allow our bodies to kind of recover, to recuperate, to deal with illnesses, etc. And so they have all their different roles. But the reason why sleep cycles are important to talk about is because how it can affect waking. Now, it's very normal, and again, this is being researched, it's very normal for a child to wake in the night, and it can be normal for that to happen frequently, for as long as it's okay with you, really, and that can vary. Some studies that have done between 0 to 18 months, even 3 years, say that it's quite normal for a child to wake in the night. So if that's you, don't worry about it. It's kind of quite normal for that to be happening, but it's all about what's acceptable for you. So when we're looking at kind of issues around sleeping and a parent is trying to understand or trying to deal with that a little bit, then we look at kind of what's happening with the progression through sleep cycles. So at the end of a sleep cycle, and this is the important bit, there is a moment of kind of almost semi-consciousness, semi-wakefulness. And that can mean that a child has a need state that needs satisfying to go back to sleep. Now, some of that needs unpicking, and the main kind of reasons I'll list now just to help you kind of understand a bit more about it. So it can be to do with food. If you've got a little one that is still kind of needing nutrition in the nighttime, then that can cause them to wake, or even in the daytime as well, actually. That's a possibility that they can wake up hungry. It can also be to do with the environment. Is it too cold, too hot? Is it too bright? That can cause them to wake. It can be to do with how much sleep they've had in the day, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, because that can cause them to wake. Or it can be to do with how they fell asleep at bedtime, and do they therefore need that reassurance to fall back to sleep. So in that wakefulness, it's about identifying or trying to understand as parents what's happened to cause them to wake up fully, and how you're going to help them to go back to sleep, or how potentially you're going to help them to avoid waking up more. And so that's the kind of the key thing, to identify what's causing them to wake from some of the things that I've mentioned, and also that we'll talk about but also to kind of help them to go kind of back to sleep. So a sleep cycle, when we talk about sleeping through the night, which is one of those phrases, a child will never really sleep through the night because they will have these moments of wakefulness. It's just whether they're able to then stitch the next cycle on back to go through the whether they're able to kind of deal with that moment of sort of wakefulness and then go back into another sleep cycle and keep going round the cycles so they help themselves to sleep for longer. So that's kind of sleep cycles. So hopefully that helps you to understand perhaps the reason why your child might be waking. It's often quite useful to think about it in terms of how long they've been asleep for, and how then if they wake after sort of 40-45 minutes, you know that it's the end of a sleep cycle. That can help you to understand as well. Now, the second thing just to talk about is sleep latency, which is a funny word, but it does sort of relate to, it sounds like what we're about to talk about, but sleep latency is the amount of time it takes a child to, or an adult, I suppose, to fall asleep. So the optimal time is kind of listed at between sort of 5 to 15 minutes. So often when people will be looking at their children's sleep, it's important to understand how quickly they're falling asleep. So a child that falls asleep really quickly can often be in the wrong state of tiredness. They're often a little bit undertired, and therefore they're overtired, and they're falling asleep really, really quickly. And sometimes that can be a clue into kind of what you need to do. And basically it would mean an earlier bedtime to avoid them from being so overtired when they go down to sleep. And a child also that takes a long time to fall asleep, and even if they're happy with it, that can be a sign that they have had too much sleep in the day, or they haven't had enough awake time, and they need to kind of build up that kind of sleep pressure to help them fall asleep. So sleep latency, so falling asleep within 5 to 15 minutes is probably the optimal time to look at. And if you've got kind of sleep concerns, then think about that as one of the component parts. Now, linked in with that and the sleep cycles that I mentioned earlier is the sleep needs. So this, again, has been researched, and you can grab a copy of my guide that looks at kind of what your child's sleep needs are by age, either by getting in touch or sign up to my newsletter, or just drop me a message and I'll kind of send it over to you. And that's all about looking at what the needs are by age. So it varies massively, and this is really important to understand, but there are recommendations, and you have to work out within your child's age how much sleep are they getting versus the kind of the range. And that also then you have to consider versus how they're sleeping. So if they're sleeping well, you don't need to change anything, whether they're on the low or the high end of the sleep needs that are recommended for that child's age. But if they're on the lower end, for example, or even on the higher end, and their sleep isn't brilliant, then you might want to consider about making some adjustments based on the fact that their sleep isn't great, and maybe they need to kind of reduce or increase the amount of sleep if you can make that happen. So again, by understanding their sleep needs, it helps to give you a clue as to what might be causing any of the disruptions that you're kind of having. And that was the third thing I wanted to talk about today. So it was all about this sort of basic building blocks that I wanted to describe to you today to help you start that kind of journey to understanding your child's sleep. And over the coming weeks, I'll be talking more about specifics around children's ages, around things like routines and environment, to help layer that on different levels to help you understand your specific sleep issues. So if you have any questions, of course, please do get in touch and let me know. I'm always happy to kind of help with all of that. And if you need any kind of extra support, then again, have a look at the website, sleeptimeconsulting.co.uk, and I'm always happy to help. Take care, have a lovely day. Bye-bye.